What's up, guys? Welcome back to Nuvova. Well, I guess Nuvova 2. Also, if you notice that things look a little bit different than they did before, yeah, I forgot to hit record again. But on the bright side, I actually found out before I progressed too much. So, yeah, anyways. So, today's topic of discussion is going to be about what is probably the worst anime I have ever seen. Probably the worst show in general. It is titled Watamote. It's your guys' fault I'm not popular. Okay, so what the hell is this show about? You're probably wondering. Well, it's about this girl who has very fucking bad social anxiety, and she's just a fucking degenerate, really. And and she wants to be popular. That's sort of like the whole shtick of the show, right? And um, so yeah, that's like the whole story, right? She barely has any friends. She barely talks to anyone outside of family, and yeah. And to an extent, and it's a cringe comedy where like someone does something awkward and you're meant to laugh at it. Like they just do things that make you cringe and you're supposed to laugh at that. I was never really a big fan of those types of comedies, but I could see the merit in it. But now like the thing about the show is you would think it'd be interesting, right? You'd think the entire story would be like, oh, Enderman would be like, the protagonist, what's her name? Tomoko, going through, and progressively becoming more social as she goes on. That's what you think it'd be about, right? But no, it's just her progressively, getting herself into more and more and more awkward situations. And well, what I find most sad is like I can't. Can I? No, I think I need iron. Shoot. Um. Wait. One of the most and and like again, like I understand it's like a cringe comedy, right? Meant to laugh, but at a certain point, it just stops being funny and it just gets sad. Like just really sad because you just see because at a certain point you kind of think like, wow, she's just doing all this shit for like some hollow ass goal, and it just gets like really sad. Not even like Neon Genesis sad, where it's like, because of like mental, where it's because like, the characters went through like significant mental struggles in their life, but just sad because the protagonist is doing something that they continuously fail at, and you just kind of feel pity at the end, you know? I might actually set up base here. This is pretty nice. Should probably get some more food though. Yeah. One thing that the show does, at least I think it does really, really well is how they always make Tomoko look like an outsider in whatever shot she's in. Like, if you notice, like just any shot where she's in and there are like more people, she's always grayed out, and that was just some like a good detail that I noticed that I thought worked pretty well. But like again, like Tomoko is just very unlikable as a character. Not to mention, very fucking freaky and shit. Which makes it even like which just makes everything even worse. And I tend to like the endings of shows. Well, at least the ones I've seen have been pretty good. But the ending to Watamote was just, you know, I remember after watching, like I remember when I was watching Watamote, I was like in the back of my mind, like I was always thinking, it's gonna get better. She's gonna change. Something's gonna happen. Something good's gonna happen. And I remember, I was about halfway through, right? And I was like, you know what? You know, I was just like, it's gonna get better. That's kind of what kept me watching, like this idea that, maybe she might get better, maybe things might change, but they just never did. And instead, the show just got sadder and sadder. I also really didn't like all like the sexual stuff at the beginning. Like, don't get me wrong, Konosuba is my favorite anime of like all time, and that is full of fucking sexual jokes. But like the ones in this were just awkward. And then there was the what like the scene where she goes to like for like some game she had, and she goes to like some place where like one of the voice actors for one of the male characters, because it was like a male dating sim, where she asked him to say a bunch of like really fucking freaky kinky ass shit, and then the guy actually says yes, and then she just, oh god. And again, and then but then you also see like she tries making a club, and you see like the whole vision where like, you know like we did this, at first it was slow, at first it was, like at first it was slow, we only had a few members, but yeah, we had a pretty good time. And then it just cuts to her, I don't need copper, and then it just straight up cuts to her having a tea party with her fucking stuffed animals, and then back to like her club proposal getting rejected, which was just so sad, man. Like, because that's the protagonist you're rooting for. You're supposed to be rooting for at the end of the day, and she's just kind of unlikable. Um. Oh yeah, and about the ending, yeah, like I was saying, like I always thought it would get better, and then it ended. I'm not gonna say how it ended, but I'm not gonna say like in to what happens in the ending, but essentially, okay, okay, I'm essentially saying what happened at the ending, but she essentially says, I don't need to be popular, and I feel like like after going back home and stuff, she's like, I don't need to be popular, and I guess for a character like this, where like this whole idea of wanting to be popular but not being able to talk to people and being incredibly freaky, I feel like it's at least a somewhat decent ending, but I don't know, it just kind of sucked in my opinion. Um, yeah. Um, what else? What else? Yeah, and to an extent, I guess, even though I kind of felt bad, I don't think you're supposed to feel bad. You know what I mean? Because you see, like 90% of the problems she causes because she causes herself, right? Like with the whole, um, what was that one? I forget. It was like, oh yeah, with her with like the whole lying to her, I think cousin or something like that about having a boyfriend and sex and all that. There was that whole debacle, and then her lying and saying that random boy was who actually had a girlfriend all along. Like, to an extent, like, yeah, that is her fault, but like at the same time, I guess the fear of not wanting to disappoint someone who looks up to you and all that, it was just kind of sad, and then you just see her bow down. I mean, at least she had the humility to bow down after, to like, apologize to him after that. But yeah, Um, but if you can tell, I think if the protagonist was just a little more likable and not just a complete fucking degenerate, I think the show probably would have been better. But, I guess I'm not really the target audience for this type of show. You know what I mean? I I, I don't know who the target audience would really be. Probably either probably either people with her same sort of social problems, I'd say. But yeah, I just I just like wasn't about it. But yeah. Mm, mm, I think I'll set up like here for the next episode. So anyway, that's gonna be all for this episode. I'm just gonna let my bed down there. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, like and subscribe if you want to see more, and watch Watamote if you want to. Like I'm saying, like I keep reiterating. Just because I say I don't like something doesn't mean you might not, and just because I say I don't doesn't mean just doesn't mean you shouldn't go watch it. If you want, go watch it. But that's all for this episode. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, I rate Watamote about 50 or 60 out of 100. But yeah, thank you for watching. Bye. Bye. Yeah, yeah.